where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you're an officer and you are called to a home to arrest a girl that's, let's say, under 10 years old, and you're arresting this, you're taking this girl in, and in terms of the climate, you realize, you realize some of the logic behind, taking a girl into custody, because in custody she'd get food because there's a famine that's really striking your area pretty hard. But what's really the reason behind this arrest is this girl was just there are reports of this girl really resorting to cannibalism, and she just ate her younger brother. Now, today, we're reviewing Tombstone by Yang Jisheng, and really how it helps in discussing in discussing really how the Renaissance can be shaped and is shaped by this Tombstone in general, and this particular piece of literature. And this book, Tombstone, is really about what we'll call the Great Famine. And it's something, it may not be a name that's widely known, because a lot of sources and a lot of investigators in China, they try to, it seems like, cover this up, and really this guy Yang, he apparently his father died in this famine, and he called this tombstone as really something to where as a memorial for his father, to, and a statement that really tell the world about their existence. And it's really, it was I mean, it's a tough read, only because of how like in the beginnings it's tough, because there's so many situations of starvation, and going to particular locations where the residents may be starving, and it's dark. Like they talk about like how towns are completely like the bark from the trees gone, there are no more pets or animals. There's if you have we've all seen those man-made lakes. They describe how those lakes were drained to eat the fish inside, even though the fish inside weren't they weren't known for it, the taste. It didn't appear that these fish were known to, they weren't meant to be eaten. You know what I'm saying? It's honestly a hellscape. The description, it was very void of life, and it was very crazy. And in terms of this period, they calculated, I think, around 52 million people died in this period of starvation. And in translating this book to English, what's crazy is the decision was made to narrow this book down like 2 times, like not once but twice, to narrow this book down. It was definitely dark, but in terms of this guy's situation, Yang, the idea is, he describes kind of the world he grew up in, to where like he describes a world where, imagine like cops coming quicker to address a situation where someone writes negatively in a toilet stall or something about really the Communist Party, or the leader, his name is Mao. They come quicker in those situations than if there is physical violence and someone's life is being like threatened. And I feel like I think really, like, I hope this is propaganda, and I'm still like holding out for the idea of maybe, I don't know what kind of, what literature would convince me otherwise, but it does, like, when I say it seems like hell, like it would be like a complete, like this is, it felt like I was getting a glimpse of hell in reading a lot of this stuff. And but in terms of his situation, this idea of patriotism is linked really close to propaganda. And I do think, we have that here, of course, because, we all, we're living, we're learning about kind of mythological characters of history and stuff like that in America, of how great our founding fathers were and things of that nature. And I do think, there's an element, but in terms of with China, imagine this, living this propaganda being linked to, really linked to staying in line under threat of like physical violence or death. And a lot of, when it comes down to death in general, they have these things called struggle sessions, to where basically the town just comes together and beats the shit out of like somebody until they're like until they've had enough. Or I don't think the decision is to kill them, but they just beat the shit out of people. And a lot of, apparently, there's a lot of descriptions to where this ends in death. And the people who really kind of are noticed to, really sympathize for these people or try to like not hit them as hard, they're called out and they may be next. So everybody is really I mean, that is, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, and it's kind of, I mean, it's a way of life for a lot of these people, apparently, in terms of the description of Mao. I'm not sure about the current administration, like, over China now, but this is like I said, it's a hellscape, and it's not an understatement to describe it like that. One thing of note here is that one thing is there was a journalist who was like who came. They were accepting some kind of award, and in this award speech, like they pointed out how this element of free speech was really linked to was no, and verbatim I think they said no country who has promoted and actually had free speech has ever had a famine. And I think this is I think this is something that we should think about now, because of course, the idea of being able to speak, and when we're able to speak, I think the people who have qualms about society are the ones under threat of not having free speech, and that is in that term today, I think it's really associated with kind of right-leaning people in terms of the United States. I'm recording this in 2024, but it's really falls in line with kind of the more conservative people in the United States, and I'm really hoping that people will kind of come to an understanding that this is advocating against free speech can essentially turn into you tying your own noose when it comes down to the idea that this will not be, that we don't tolerate this, in terms of who gets that power, how they're going to use that power in the future. Definitely something of note. But when it came down to this idea, nobody reported on mass starvation in general and how in the situation, and the idea was they didn't want to be seen as going against the party or against the current administration. And a lot of these journalists, they really express their regret, because express kind of really a lot of regret about how things turned out for a lot of people. And they really talk about how they really failed everyone by not speaking up and speaking out. And this idea of really being afraid, a lot of people who did speak out were labeled as, I believe they were opportunist, or they were labeled as opportunists, and they could easily have been fired or physically assaulted or just outright killed in a lot of these situations, it seems like. And this is like I said, it's I feel like I should, somebody's gonna take a shot for how many times I can say this, but it does describe a hellscape. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. And also, this government, this administration, or this, they pushed names this is the outstanding, the outstanding project, the outstanding perfect project, and it's crazy, because it's just these guys are does everyone agree with this element of exaggeration? And it's clear they probably don't, but I mean, it was they called every project that they went under, it was the great something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, we remember the Great Wall of China, and it's just like they're really trying to make sure that like every person, every leader after them wants to make their name just as great as, or just, their projects just as perfect as the Great Wall of China. And, it's crazy, but this is a theme that is pushed and advertised so heavily. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think this element of really exaggeration it's all through really the administration, but in terms of this idea, a lot of this book, it goes behind the quote unquote great leap forward, and the idea here is that people, if everyone in society worked hard, they can show the world up with the power of communism and really outdo America and the West and this idea, and show them just how great communism can be. And and in terms of this idea of starvation, it really came behind a concept of communal kitchens. And believe it or not, they had like regular people. They called them peasants. I'm not sure if they really called them peasants there, but they used peasants like in the book, like on a regular basis. like just regular people being synonymous, or it feels like regular people were in synonymous with the concept of peasants. How frequently they use peasants in the book, but the idea was like these peasants were like farmers essentially. They made everyone disassemble their individual kitchens to where, like, if they seen smoke rise from your house or something like that, it'd be a problem. Like you'd have to maybe go under a struggle session where you're killed by your village or some shit like that. But it just seemed really extreme. But this idea was, hey, like let's make the promoting communism through communal kitchens, of like kind of being the only place where people were able to eat. And there were so many things wrong with with them pushing this, and it led to a lot regarding regarding the starvation period in general. But the idea here is that if having communal kitchens gave the party more power and control over the individual in various ways, and if that's your goal and that's your aim, I can see that as extremely effective in terms of how at some point they even talk about using it to for war, for actually like war, the army and stuff like that, in terms of if this is the only place that you're allowed to eat, or that you can eat and prepare food, I mean, imagine going against the party, the power of them now being able to control whether you eat. It can be very, very, very powerful. And the idea here is this power of like of having everyone come together would make everyone leave behind the concept of individualism, and that's like it's very, very important for like in terms of the definition of communism. Avoiding individualism was a powerful concept, and it was something that, in terms of it defined the element of communism by not being able to have really individual things, and it was, I mean, it, like I said, it felt like a hellscape. It felt like a real life hellscape in terms of the description here, but it was in terms of the actual aims of the party, it could, it provided more control in terms of the concept, how it's laid out. It could easily provide more control in terms of the problems that came about with these communal kitchens. Like they were known to be like really less efficient, because a lot of when it came down to the fires required for heating a lot of food, it became less efficient in the ways to where only larger logs were really effective in building this fire, and the smaller branches that they were less effective, or they weren't used as much, and forests got cleared out extremely forests got cleaned out really quick, and that in terms of like, they describe how like people had to travel for miles to get to this kitchen. And it's just like, yeah, I'm thinking about a village. You're probably thinking like, okay, this is like at the center of a village and everybody's kind of in walking distance. A lot of times they're not. They have to take go on a journey to get something to eat, and it is insanity for some of these people, but it's life. You didn't want to have anyone seeing smoke come out your chimney in any kind of in any way. And when it came down to these like problems, apparently this wasn't isolated with just the food. Like the construction projects in general, China was littered with unfinished development because of this idea of a great leap forward. And the what really created this was a lot of people and officials were lying about what was being done, and the idea was nobody wanted to give the bad news to their superior up. What was really this description in the book seemed very like everybody was two things. They were both a slave, and they were both a slave and a tyrant. And this system kept people in this paradigm, or kept people in this in this chain of thought. And nobody wanted to tell the truth, and it got really out of hand. It got really out of hand, and like people, I think I remember some doctor was basically like, he got frustrated with like a superior, and he ended up getting killed because he was just like, yo, they're hungry. They're fucking hungry. Like, what do you want? Everybody's fucking hungry. And it was just like, It's like, yo, they killed this man for basically telling them exactly what it was. Everybody's hungry. Like, I'm imagining a doctor writing on his prescription, "Oh, more food." Like what? Like what the fuck? It's insanity, but a lot of people were doing that, and when it came down to like signing, when it came down to like classifications and hiding the element of starvation, they would call it a disease. Like they would literally call death by starvation was a disease. Like it became a disease, so they could hide the deaths with the idea of, like, oh, who, some kind of plague is going on. And like a lot of people died. A lot of people died. A lot of people were like, we're talking about like even like high level officials, their families suffered and died and they didn't want to go and tell. This chain was so strong that they didn't want to go and tell anybody or tell their superiors about what was going on, because they may be seen and labeled as these opportunists that would, that were going against the party, or against communism in general. And I mean, it's a system that is, I mean, it seems like oh, the power of an invisible system, that we're kind of subjected to now is something, but like really the power, like it felt like that power was so much stronger here in terms of really staying in line with thought, because really being labeled this, and having your village essentially basically have to beat you to beat some sense into you, or just beat you to death. You're always up for no one. You're always up. No one's safe. You know what I'm saying? No one feels really safe, and it's like I said, it's really described as a hellscape. And in terms of commune kitchens, they were really they were heavily associated with this goal of communism. And really, when it came down to like Mao in general, and how Mao went about things in general, this was heavily tied to the aims of the Communist Party. And in terms of the actual situation itself, there was actually a situation where they, like, some investigator goes to a village at some point and say, "Oh, where are all the men at?" And some lady points in a direction, and he goes down there thinking like, okay, they're probably working or something, down by the river. And he goes there and he sees like and there's like basically just dead bodies everywhere, and it's just like, oh shoot. Or it's like, like, and he calls in a neighboring village to help bury the dead bodies. And the neighboring village, and the people from the neighboring village, they come over there, and they're too weak to bury the dead. So somebody from their neighboring village comes along and helps them out. And it is crazy. But they are really, like, this element of bringing someone, to like the environment was so strong that this was this didn't touch. They call him Commander Mao, and it it was like this wasn't something that he was really really keen or aware of, and it's pretty scary to think that that level of disconnection could exist, especially like later on they try to save this guy's ego at the end of the, or like when they're really trying to point out like, oh, people, like I'm just imagining people dying and them trying to say, oh, maybe he might have been 0.1% wrong in this particular like trying to save this man's ego in any way, shape, or form because they don't want to get killed. And it is just like I mean, just imagining that in general it's crazy, because it's all done in the name of a lot of this was done in the name of sacrifice. You sacrifice for me, or like you sacrifice to the party, and everything's okay, and that's kind of the highest honor, to sacrifice for the party and stuff like that. And these guys were crazy. In terms of like how much control this guy had, I mean, they tried to set a like kind of a precedence throughout like communes of planting the seeds too close together, because Mao liked to see this particular thing, or this particular this particular pattern. And everyone, like everyone knew this didn't work, but they did it. And it became, it led to exactly what you think it lead to: less production. And it was it was just like, hey, we're trying to make this guy happy, and now millions of lives, you know what I'm saying, like millions of lives lost. Very very scary thought. But I mean, in terms of mediating and fixing all this, it's crazy, because a lot of it was like or like they called this was it responsibility gardens, or some, or not gardens, but response, I think it called like what is it called, responsibility, or responsibility fields. And they call them that. The formal people called them responsibility field. The peasants, the quote unquote peasants, called them salvation fields, because essentially what this was basically an individual being responsible for an area, like basically reverting back to kind of a more reverting back to one person being responsible per area. And this is seen as kind of this is in terms of a person, a person that's Communist Party, they view this as kind of a regression into individualism. And this really worked for them, but it didn't. But there was a lot of slack. one of the guys who really tried to get this spread across basically open this idea up to a county. He's kind of had like kind of a legacy of two things, because it was just like, one, all of these fields, you look at all these lives that you saved, but in terms of listening to you still are responsible, because you lied in a lot of your reports, you over-reported, and you still caused all this, all of these things, because a lot of people were over-reporting apparently, and this over-reporting caused basically the government to add more, or to ask for more for their reserves, because there was so much over-reporting. And I still don't know what they have reserves for, because I mean, at some point it's literally like becomes a question, like, what are the reserves for if all these people died? And it's like, I mean, because at some point it was made apparent to the people in charge of reserves, and they still tried to hold on to the reserves that they had. I mean, it was complete madness. In terms of like a lot of what you'll notice is or what was really like made more apparent was like the biology of starving to death, and starving to death, because when someone's taking months, or starving over the period of months, a lot of the biological processes start to kind of start to shut off. Like you notice, like and in particular with women, like the idea of the sexual organs, in terms of like a lot of this stuff basically shuts down. And they talk about a decrease in birth rate and stuff like that. It's really, a lot of people were suffering over the course of time, and you started to see kind of the effects of long-term starvation on people and populations. At some point, they published, they tried to spread around, the nutritional value of bugs, even though people would get sick if they ate, if they ate bugs. And if you double, in one piece of information I was going around, if you double cook rice, then it'll be more filling and you'll get more out of it. This was false. The idea is, the rice puffs up if you double cook it. But there aren't any like there's a decrease in nutritional value that's associated with cooking it even more. And this was going around, of course. Survival, in terms of cannibalism was rampant in this period, and it is insane to think. But a lot of people resorted to cannibalism, and it was, every county, like this was a thing. And there was, a lot of people trying to, basically rob graves to eat. the dead, and it was they described some pretty horrific, some pretty horrific things in there. And some guy was like, after you eat, a lot of apparently, like, there's a lot of complications that come with that particular idea of cannibalism. Some people were okay, but others, like, they just, like, a lot of people, they suffered in different ways. Cannibalism apparently isn't the same across everyone. And and at some point they talk about how, like, there was a situation where someone beat someone to, like, a grave, and they were robbing the grave, but they were trying to rob the grave without anybody knowing, but somebody came there and they ended up having to kill the person that came there. So and they were eating them, and they ate them instead. And there are situations to where they start selling human meat on the in the markets, and they'll like dress it up in as pork, and with rice and stuff like that. And like I said, this book got dark really fast, and I'm like, it was very, very much, in terms of the environment, nothing to play with. When people starve, or villages are starving, what they do, it's crazy. But it wasn't like, a lot of what's crazy is a lot of the grain, like, they had to send a lot of their production back, and thinking, back to the government, thinking that the government would, basically distribute back to them. And it never happened. And there were a lot of people that paid that price. And this was kind of, in terms of this guy, Commander Mao, he actually, like, it seemed almost as if, like, okay, like, maybe, this guy isn't so bad, in terms of the way he talks. But that's in terms of the way he kind of realizes, like, oh, he's being lied to and stuff like that, it seems like, okay, at some point, maybe it's not that bad. Or maybe he's not that bad. And you realize that he's very much in favor of the system that inspires fear in his supporters, and creates everyone in this idea of being both a slave and a tyrant. And that's something that a lot of people don't quite understand. Like, in terms of, like, what's going on, how things happen, and you realize that this guy, he does appear like, okay, this guy may not be so bad. But when you realize, I think, like, this guy only has to say a name and it's over for them, regardless of who it is. This guy put himself at the top of this government, and at the top of, like, in terms of officials and being in charge, he placed himself there to be kind of the primary person. And regardless of how he may really come across as a reasonable person, it is not the actuality for a lot of the people under this person. It's in terms of being able to inspire this much fear amongst people. It is like I said, like, these guys were scared to tell him the truth, and that was something that was it was definitely something, because the way in which he was able to able to label people as opportunists and have people fired, beaten, or killed, essentially. This was not a reasonable man, and this was not a reasonable man in terms of his role in the system. And another thing is there's a point in this book where they describe the difference between totalitarianism and dictatorship. And totalitarianism is different in terms of it's a system. It's a system that really revolves around at some point the peasants revolted, of course, and the idea was this system allowed him to really contact villages and tell them, or basically officials to contact villages and tell them, hey, don't serve outsiders, and a lot of these guys were caught up in the system of totalitarianism, because there's a difference in dictatorship and totalitarianism, in that totalitarianism seems like it's more of a systemic thing, in terms of really the power is something that can touch you from the system that you have to live in, rather than you involving a single person itself. And that was in terms of the totalitarianism really relying on a system. In terms of this idea of these guys having as much power as they have, it does feel like 1984 would be a dream for a lot of these guys, or for the system in general, because it seems like they really want to control people in terms of thoughts, what is said, stuff like it's very dark in terms of the control that they're looking for. And communal kitchens, that was, excuse my French, but it got some dicks hard on the fucking in that official lineup, because it was just yo, I can, imagine no one, imagine me being able to stop you from eating, you know what I'm saying? And this is under threat of your village may actually be the ones to kill you. You know what I'm saying? This is crazy, but it's real. And in terms of this guy Mao, like I said, he couldn't take criticism in general, and he was able to, like, a lot of people tried to, or not a lot of people, but a few people tried to speak up in terms of high officials tried to speak up. At some point, I think his cousin has to come out and tell him, like, yeah, they're not gonna fucking talk to you, like, this is, or they're not gonna tell you, but I'm gonna tell you because I'm your cousin. This isn't working in terms of the system that you have now. And it's just like, this catches Mao as a shock, and it's just like, yo, this is, I've never, imagine this idea of, being that, or any leader being that disconnected. You know what I'm saying? But I think a lot of them were, or this guy was, and definitely something. In terms of leaving off, really, the last part of this book, they talk about how autocracy or dictatorship, and it's kind of, it's the quickest solution to anarchy. And this is a point that I try to make a lot. In terms of the solutions to a violent revolution may not be what you really, really want. It's just a way to make the chaos stop. And when that really, really, that idea of making the chaos stops supersedes, you may not like what you get in terms of a solution, because in terms of taking your time and trying to find a system, in terms of taking your time and finding a system that works, it seems like that does take time. It does take, and it will, in terms of really getting to a point to where things really work for a lot of people in a way that is preferable. It's not something that's gonna be the quickest solution that arises from this element of chaos. A lot of people seem to and I really want people to understand that this idea of a renaissance in general, it's about it's about kind of realizing the good in society, because if we don't do that and we resort to total destruction of a society, that is not going to be in favor of a lot more people than us trying to figure out what's the best way to go about moving in the future with a more active role of fixing what we have. In no way do I think that America is ideal in terms of the way in which we kind of go about things, but in terms of recognizing what does work, I think it's very important, because it's a way to move forward without the destruction that comes with anything, a violent revolution. This is preferable in so many different ways, and I really hope people understand that the solution, when people look for the solution for in terms of being in the midst of a violent anarchist movement, versus people looking for a solution in a society to where there's a lot of frustration kind of under the surface. That solution is going to look different, and that solution is going to be of a different quality than, those solutions are going to be of different qualities. And it's important to really note that. And this has been Tombstone by Yang Jisheng. And like I said, this has kind of been really my first piece of Chinese literature. I'm not sure how much of this was propaganda. I'm not sure, really, the current administration in China. But if this book was accurate, if this book, in terms of really, this guy did a great job of describing a hell landscape, or a hellscape, literally a hellscape. And hoping for the best in terms of my Chinese brothers and sisters out there. And when it comes down to really what we're expecting now and what's expecting now, regardless of where this book came from, it does help really, really solidify the idea of taking the time in now to understand and move forward. I'm your bookman for this report, Sleepy, and if you're on YouTube, if you're on if you're following through a podcast, make sure to follow. And thank you so much. See you guys soon.